Hi, I'm Amy Thompson, Director of Financial Aid for St. Joseph's College. In this presentation, I will discuss the general financial aid application process. I will cover the various types of financial aid applications, including the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA, as well as the New York State applications. To ensure that you are considered for all types of financial aid, it is always best to check with the colleges you are planning on applying to for admission to see what applications they require. This information can typically be found on the college's financial aid website or by calling the financial aid office or speaking to the admissions office directly. Each college will have their own process listed, including what applications they expect you to file and when they would like you to file those. Many colleges will list what we call priority deadline dates, and they would like their applying incoming freshman class to make sure that they submit their financial aid applications by those deadlines. And the reason that's really important is that some financial aid is awarded on a first come, first served basis. So if your applications for financial aid are received later than other students who've already applied, you could potentially miss out on something that you would have been eligible for had your application been in by the priority deadline date. So again, check each college specifically. Every college does things a little bit differently in terms of what they want you to do and when they would like you to complete that by. Generally, I recommend that students look for this information online and maybe create a spreadsheet of all of the different colleges that they're considering applying to, what is required for financial aid at each college, and what deadline date the college has set, if any, to make sure that all of those applications are completed on time. We'll be focusing a lot tonight on the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA. This is the application that all students have to do if you're interested in applying for financial aid at most colleges throughout the country. So everyone should have to do this one, and we'll spend a pretty good deal of time talking about this tonight. The website to complete the FAFSA is studentaid.gov. And there is actually now an app that you can download called My Student Aid. You can find this in the app stores either for an iPhone or an Android. If you would like to download this to your smartphone or your tablet, you can complete the FAFSA through the application as well. The 2021-22 FAFSA, which is what our high school seniors in the fall of 2020 will be filing for next academic year, will become available on October 1st of 2020. And this application will be looking for income information from the 2019 tax year. And we'll go over a few other things that they'll be looking for as well. This is a screenshot of the main landing page of studentaid.gov when you get there so that you know what it looks like. And if you are new to the process, you would need to create an account, which you can see right under the login button, before the student would begin the FAFSA process. And once you do that and log in, it will take you to a screen that looks like this. And you can see in the upper right, it says begin, complete, review, or correct the FAFSA form. There will be two choices, just to know as well, under the FAFSA application, because the current academic year FAFSA is still available, so you do want to make sure that you select the correct FAFSA application. If you are a senior in high school this year, it would be the 2021-22 FAFSA. In order to complete and sign the FAFSA electronically, students will need to create an account, as I mentioned, from the login page, and they will create something called an FSA ID and password, and this will act as their login information and will also act as the electronic signature to sign the FAFSA electronically. So the student who's completing the FAFSA needs to create his or her own FSA ID and password. And if the student is a dependent student, which is generally most of our high school students, if you're under the age of 24 and you're not married and don't have your own children yet, and you're not working on a graduate degree, generally you will need to report parental information on the FAFSA. So one parent of that dependent student needs to create an FSA ID and password as well. So these are something you can create ahead of time. If you're not ready to complete the FAFSA yet, or if you're looking at this before October 1st and the FAFSA is not open yet, you can go ahead and set up your FSA IDs and passwords, one for the student and one for one parent ahead of time. If as a parent you already have an FSA ID and password because perhaps you created one a year or so ago for another student going through the process, you do not need to create a new one. That is your ID and password and it represents you and your signature. So as long as you remember what that is, you can use that to sign a new student's FAFSA who's coming through the process. Some of the records that you'll need before you sit down to file the FAFSA, they do ask for the student driver's license number if the student has one. You will definitely need to know Social Security numbers for both the student and the parents. Now, you don't necessarily have to have the cards in front of you. I just like to list that on there because you do want to make absolutely sure that you are entering the correct information on the FAFSA form because it goes through several different government database matches. And if you accidentally invert two numbers on your SSN, that is going to slow down the process of it matching up with your records at the Social Security Administration. So always be very, very careful and that you're entering the information in the correct spots. Other things that you'll need, any W-2 forms or other records of money that you earned in 2019, and this goes for both the student and his or her parents. 2019 federal income tax returns if you filed one, and any applicable schedules that were filed with that tax return. You should have a copy of that in front of you as well. Records of untaxed income, and I will go over what types of untaxed income are required to be reported on the FAFSA so that you're aware of that as well. Current bank statements, and if you have any investments like stocks, bonds, mutual funds, certificates of deposit, things of that nature, you will want to have some sort of record of approximately how much is in those accounts as of the day you're filing. So generally, we would recommend that you have maybe your most recent quarterly statement available. And if it's a savings account or a checking account, perhaps you have your most recent monthly statement available so that you can see what is in those accounts as well. And then every student does need to let the FAFSA know where the information should be sent. So you can actually list up to 10 colleges at a time on your FAFSA application, and every college is represented by a federal school code. So you can find this information again on our websites or by calling the financial aid or admissions offices at your colleges. And you can also do a search within the FAFSA. So once you're already in the FAFSA and you've started the process, when you get to the college code part, you can search the name of the college and the city and the state that it's located in, and then it will return a list of results and you can select the appropriate one so that you ensure that your FAFSA is sent to the colleges that you're interested in. If for any reason you are applying to more than 10 colleges, what I usually recommend is that rank your colleges maybe in order of preference and list your first 10 choices on the FAFSA form. Once you hit submit and let that FAFSA process, it'll take a few days, but then all of that information will be sent to the 10 colleges that you listed. And then once that has happened, you can go back in with the student's FSA ID and password, and you can make corrections to the FAFSA at any time, including changing up some of the college codes that you listed initially, so that if you are doing more than 10 schools, some additional colleges can receive your FAFSA after the initial submission. Within the FAFSA, there is also something called the IRS-Data Retrieval tool. We do usually recommend that students and parents use this if they are able to. What this does, if you allow it, it will take you out of the FAFSA site temporarily and over into the IRS site, where it can actually locate your tax return and then automatically populate that information where it needs to go on the FAFSA form for you. So it does take some of the guesswork out of it for you in that it will find your adjusted gross income, it will find your taxes paid, and it will populate that information on the FAFSA for you so that you don't need to do that manually. There will be some other questions that you'll still have to answer manually. For example, if there are two parents and they filed a married filing joint tax return, you do have to put in the income of parent 1 and the income of parent 2 based off of your W-2 forms. But it will take some of the guesswork out and get some of that information in there for you. So we do recommend, if you can use this, it is a good tool. What it also does is it alerts the federal processor as well as the colleges receiving your FAFSA to the fact that you have used the data retrieval tool. So when the FAFSA comes in that way and it's coded in a certain way to let us know that the student or the parent have used the IRS data retrieval tool, we know that that information is accurate because it has been automatically imported from the IRS website. So that does help in some ways in cutting down the chance that you would have to send us additional documentation down the line. A couple of reasons why you might not be able to use it. If you are married and you filed taxes as married filing separately, you won't be able to use the data retrieval tool because it cannot locate 2 tax returns and pull that information in. Or if you filed a Puerto Rican or foreign tax return, you would not have that option available to you as well. But if you are able to use it, we do recommend it. And I do also recommend that you have your taxes in front of you, even if you are trying to use the data retrieval tool, because they will ask you to enter your name and address exactly the way it appears on your tax return. So you want to make sure that you have that form in front of you and you're entering that information accurately as the way it is listed on the form so that they can locate your tax return within the IRS database. If you can't use it for some reason, if you try and it's just not working, or you filed married filing separately and you're not able to use it, you can absolutely just go ahead and enter the information manually. When you're in the FAFSA, it will tell you what line numbers to look at on your tax return to find the information that they're looking for. Some people will have to answer questions about investments and assets, and if you do receive untaxed income, which I'm going to talk about in the next slide, some of those items may have to be listed as well. Not everyone will have to answer questions about investments. It will depend on your overall income for the 2019 year. And then after you enter that information, you may get a question that asks you if your assets and investments exceed a certain amount. So depending on your answer to that question, the form will determine whether or not you need to input specific information about your investments and assets. If it is determined that you do have to report this information, this is just a general overview of what investments do include. They would include real estate, but not your primary home. Any rental property, trust funds, UGMA or UTMA accounts would have to be listed as the asset of the student, if those exist. Money market funds, mutual funds, CDs, stock options and bonds, other securities, and installment and land sale contracts, and educational savings accounts as well do get considered to be an investment. In the case of things like the educational savings account, such as the 529 New York State Savings Plan, if a family has a 529 plan, it is typically listed as the asset of the parent for their dependent student. So even though it may be the student's account, if the parent is the custodian on it, that would be listed as a parent asset. And that is actually a better place for it to go. Less of the parent's investments will be going into the formula for the expected family contribution that the FAFSA calculates, which I will actually talk about in the second part of this presentation series. Investments do not include your primary home, so if you are a homeowner, you are not required to report the value of your primary home. Value of life insurance is not included, and also the value of retirement accounts are not included. So if you have a 401k, a 403b, an IRA, or any other pension funds or annuities, that maybe you're not necessarily drawing from yet, but you have saved for retirement, you are not required to list the value of those accounts as an investment or an asset, because those are earmarked and set aside for retirement. Certain types of untaxed income you will have to report. If you did make a payment to a tax-deferred pension or retirement plan in 2019, so let's say you contributed to a 401k or a 403b, maybe directly through your employer, You'll typically find that information on box 12A through 12D on your W-2 form, and only the codes listed there would be required to be reported as a payment to a tax-deferred pension and retirement plan. Just a couple of other things listed here. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are definitely some things that are included. Any child support received in 2019 would be required to be listed. Untaxed portions of an IRA distribution, not including rollovers, would need to be listed. Veterans non-education benefits, workers' compensation, and certain types of disability benefits would need to be listed as well. Untaxed income that you would not be required to report would include untaxed Social Security benefits or SSI, Supplemental Security Income, or any welfare payments that are being received. Those would not need to be reported. And again, the FAFSA is pretty clear cut, and it will walk you through all of this as you're going through each section. And if you don't understand a question or you're not sure what should be reported or what shouldn't be reported, there are expandable help fields that you can click on within the FAFSA on the web application that will explain in further detail what they are looking for in that. There will be an entirely separate application process if you're interested in applying for New York State financial aid. And there are some requirements for New York State aid in terms of both the student and the parents have to be residents of New York in order to be eligible to apply for New York State aid. And the student must be attending a college in the state of New York to receive New York State aid. So unfortunately, if you are a New York State resident, but you are only interested in attending colleges in North Carolina, for example, you would not be eligible to receive New York State financial aid there. You do have to attend college in the state of New York to be eligible for this. So as long as you are completing your FAFSA and you are saying yes that you are a New York State resident and you have listed at least one college code on your FAFSA that exists within the state of New York, the TAP application or the Tuition Assistance Program through New York State, that application will be open and available to you. Once you have submitted your FAFSA, you will take you to a confirmation page. So hang out on that confirmation page before you close out. And right on that confirmation page, after you submit your FAFSA, there will be a link that says, if you would like to apply for New York State financial aid, please click here. And that will take you right into the New York State application. It will use mostly information from the FAFSA to pre-fill itself. You will just have to enter a few additional questions and then submit the New York State application as well. If for some reason you miss the link on the confirmation page, you can apply for New York State aid at a later date. You do just have to wait about a week or so from the date that you submitted the FAFSA for it to be fully processed before you can go to the New York State website, which is listed on this slide, hesc.ny.gov, and then you would be able to complete the New York State application directly through that website at that time if you missed the link on your confirmation page of your FAFSA. Another important thing to know about the New York State application, you can only list one college at a time on this one. So, we understand and the state understands that when most students are filling this out in October, November, or December of their senior year, they have not necessarily narrowed down their college choice yet. They're applying to several schools. They've maybe listed several schools on their FAFSA, and they have not made a final decision yet. So what we generally recommend is it'll take the first New York State code on your FAFSA, and it will populate that for you on your New York State application. So if you're really not 100% sure yet, you can leave whatever New York school is populated on there for the time being. You just have to remember, come April, May, or June, when you make your final decision about what school you're attending, if that school is in New York, that you go back and double check on your New York State application and make sure that the correct New York school is listed there. And they do also ask for the college issued student ID, which again, when you're completing this process in October, November, or December, you may not have that information yet. So there is a way to skip that temporarily. And again, once you have made your final decision, you would go back into the state application, make sure that the correct school code is listed, and then add your college issued student ID for that particular college. Also important to note, there are separate applications for some other New York State programs. So you do want to make sure you first complete your FAFSA and then complete the New York State TAP application after completing your FAFSA. But then there are some separate applications for some other programs if you're interested in those. An example of this would be the Excelsior Scholarship, which is the free tuition program for students who are attending a SUNY or CUNY or community college in the state of New York and whose parents' income is under a certain threshold. Those applications for the Excelsior Award and something else called the Enhanced Tuition Award, which is available for some private colleges, are usually available in the spring of the senior year. So really important that you make sure you do the FAFSA and the New York State TAP application sometime during the fall of the senior year as you're applying to colleges, and then later down the line in spring of the senior year, applications for things like the Excelsior program and the Enhanced Tuition Award program will open up. Just a screenshot of the New York State site so you know what it looks like, and I do encourage everyone to just go out to this website and take a look. If you go under the Pay tab in the green bar sort of towards the top there, you can learn more about the New York State financial aid programs that are available and see if there's any other programs that you might be eligible for, and again see if there's a separate application required for those like the Excelsior and ETA that I mentioned. Application process other. So I think I said in the beginning of this presentation that all schools do things a little differently, which is why it is really important to check with each college directly to see what they require and when they would like you to do it. Again, most colleges are going to require the FAFSA, so we've covered that. And if it's a school within the state of New York, you want to make sure you do all the New York State applications. We covered that. But some schools will also ask for additional items. If you are looking at any private colleges that are a little more selective or a little more expensive, they may require that you file something called the CSS profile form. This is an application that is administered by the College Board, which is the same entity that administers the SAT exam. And this will be available on October 1st as well for the 2021-22 academic year for our seniors who are seniors right now in fall of 2020. And this does actually have a fee to file this form, so I just want to make everyone aware of that. It's generally around $25 for the initial application, which will be sent to one college, and then $16 for each additional college that you need to send the CSS profile to. I only recommend that you file this if it's absolutely required by the college, again, because there is a cost to it. And they do actually go a little more in depth than the FAFSA does in terms of the information that they collect from you. So only file this one if the school is asking for it. But if the school is asking for it, it's very important to make sure that you file this, because this is how a lot of the private colleges will distribute their own internal scholarship funds. If they have large endowments, they may use this to distribute those funds to students as well. So it is very important to make sure you do this if the college is requiring it. Again, if you're not sure, you can check directly with your financial aid office at the college you're interested in, or go to their website and look at their processes, or you can go to this link that I have right on this slide at the College Board website, which will take you to a list of every college in the country that uses the CSS profile by state. So you can look at your colleges and see if they're listed on that list. The other thing schools may have that would be specific to them would be an institutional application. So again, you need to check with each college specifically to see if this is something that they require. Other colleges, some colleges may offer their endowed scholarships, their internal scholarships, but there may be a separate application process for those in addition to just applying to the school for admission. So this is where you really have to do a little bit of research and maybe talk to the financial aid office or a representative and find out, what do they require, what needs to be filed, is there anything in addition to the FAFSA that you need to complete, and if so, they will let you know what that is and where to find it if they have institutional applications available. And then just lastly, before we wrap up this section, I just want to cover special circumstances briefly. These are things that you really can't report on the FAFSA. The FAFSA is a pretty cut and dried form. It's going to be asking for things like your adjusted gross income, how much was earned from working, how much was paid in taxes in the specific tax year that they're looking for, which in this case is 2019. They will also ask how many people are in the household and how many of those people will be attending college during the academic year that you're applying for financial aid for. So they do take all of that into consideration, but there is nowhere to report a special circumstance or a special situation. And if you have one of these scenarios on the next slide, what you need to do is contact each financial aid office directly at each of the colleges that you're interested in to find out what their process is and if they can potentially consider you for a special circumstance request. Generally, if we will consider it, we will ask for additional documentation, and then we will review that documentation, and we may be able to make some changes to the information that you listed on your FAFSA. So one of the things that we see most frequently with a special circumstance would be a change in employment status. Let's say for 2019, both of the students' parents were employed full-time, so the adjusted gross income, is a certain number because of that full-time employment. And then something happened in 2020 where maybe one or both of the parents lost their job or had a reduction of hours. So in fact, the current income that the family is earning is actually less than what is reflected on the FAFSA from the 2019 tax year. That is something that most schools would consider a special circumstance for. And again, we'll just ask for some documentation, and then we can go in and make changes to the FAFSA using a more accurate portrayal of the family's current income situation. Every school, again, will do this a little bit differently, so you need to speak to each school specifically, and you need to send the documentation to each school specifically before they would consider making these changes. A couple of other examples: medical or dental expenses not covered by insurance, recent change in marital status. Let's say maybe the parents were married and filed a joint tax return in 2019, and now in 2020 or 2021, that situation has changed, and maybe they're separated and the student is only living with one of the parents. So a couple of other examples on here. This is not an exhaustive list. Basically, if you have anything going on where you feel that the information you're reporting on your FAFSA is not really an accurate portrayal of the family's ability to pay, you can check with each college to see if they would consider your situation. That wraps up this section of the presentation, which is the application process. If you have any questions about this presentation, please feel free to contact me at althompson@sjcny.edu. Thank you so much.